They say a man's word is his bond. It's a nice idea, the kind of thing fathers tell their sons. My best friend's bond, the one he swore on his life, was worth 2 years of my freedom, 113 Sundays staring at a concrete wall, and a final 7-figure payday. This isn't a story about revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was a business transaction. He called me a bad investment, so I decided to collect on the debt. Alex and I were the kind of friends people write stories about. We weren't just friends, we were brothers, forged in the crucible of a nothing-special suburb, inseparable since we were 6 years old. He was the charismatic brain, the kid who could talk his way out of any trouble. I was the loyal one, the quiet fixer, the one who always had his back. It was a perfect partnership. He had the vision, I had the resolve. When we were 25, we started a small tech firm out of his parents' basement. It was his idea, a brilliant algorithm for streamlining supply chain logistics. But it was my life savings that paid for the first servers and my late nights that kept them from crashing. We were a team. We were going to be millionaires. And for a while, it looked like we would be. We were getting buzz, attracting interest. We were on the cusp of landing a major round of funding that would change everything. But we were also burning through cash faster than we were making it. We needed that investment, and we needed it now. The crime, when it happened, wasn't violent. It was a quiet series of keystrokes in the dead of night. Alex found a way to manipulate our user data to inflate our engagement metrics just enough to look irresistible to the investors. It wasn't just unethical, it was securities fraud. It was a felony. He told me it was the only way. "Just this once, Mike," he said, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and ambition. "We get the funding, we scale up, and we make it right. No one will ever know." But someone did. An anonymous whistleblower. Suddenly, the SEC was sniffing around. The dream was turning into a nightmare. I'll never forget the night he came to my apartment. He was a wreck, pacing my small living room, his face pale. The investigators were closing in, and they were closing in on him. He had been the one to sign the falsified reports. "They're going to ruin me, Mike," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My career, my life, it's over." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, calculated plea. "I have a family to think about, a future. You're single, you have no attachments. It would be different for you." I just stared at him, the implication hanging in the air like poison. "I'll get the best lawyers," he said, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "You'll get a light sentence, minimum security, a slap on the wrist. And I swear to you, Mike, I will make this right. When you get out, you won't have to work another day in your life. I will take care of you. For life. That's my bond." We were brothers. I had always had his back. This, I thought, was just the biggest test of that loyalty. But as he was leaving, a cold, unfamiliar feeling crept into my gut. A flicker of doubt. On a small digital voice recorder I kept on my desk, I pressed the little red button. I didn't know why. It wasn't a plan. It was just insurance. I recorded the last few minutes of his panicked promises, his solid oaths. Then I tucked the recorder into a box of old college textbooks and forgot about it. A month later, I was standing in a courtroom, pleading guilty to a crime I didn't commit. I took the fall for my brother. The 2 years I spent in a minimum security federal prison were like living in grayscale. It was a world of monotony, of beige walls and the constant low hum of institutional life. Every day was the same. Wake up, count, work, eat, count, sleep. The highlight of my week was a 30-minute phone call. Alex's calls and letters were a lifeline at first. He told me about the company's success. The funding had come through, of course. They were expanding, Hiring, becoming the titans we had always dreamed of being. He sent money to my commissary account. He promised me he was setting up a trust fund. "Just hold on, Mike," he wrote in one letter. "The world is going to be yours when you get out." But as time went on, the letters became less frequent. The calls grew shorter. His stories were less about us and more about me. His new house in the hills, his new German sports car, his family's vacation to Italy. I was a distant, inconvenient memory. But I held on to his promise. It was the only thing I had. It was my bond. The day I walked out of those gates, the sunlight felt unnaturally bright. The world was louder, faster, more colorful than I remembered. And standing there, leaning against a gleaming black Porsche, was Alex. He looked different, sharper. His suit was tailored. His watch was worth more than my parents' house. He gave me a quick, awkward hug. "Welcome back, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. The gesture felt hollow. The dynamic between us was wrong from the start. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was my benefactor. As we drove through the city, he pointed out the new skyscraper his firm now occupied. He talked about his success, his genius, his relentless drive. He didn't ask me a single question about the last 2 years of my life. When we got to the rundown apartment he had rented for me, he pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket. "Here's a little something to get you back on your feet," he said, peeling off a few $100 bills. It was a generous amount, but the way he handed it to me felt like a tip, a charitable donation, not the first payment on a sacred debt. Rebuilding my life was harder than I ever imagined. That felony on my record was a brand. It closed doors before I even had a chance to knock. I couldn't get a job in finance, in tech, in anything that resembled my old life. I ended up working a dead-end job stocking shelves at a warehouse, the night shift. The work was grueling. The pay was pathetic. Alex's help was a slow, humiliating drip feed. A few $100s transferred to my account when my rent was late. A patronizing text message. "Hang in there, buddy. Things will turn around." He was keeping me afloat, but just barely. It felt less like support and more like a strategy to keep me quiet and out of sight. I wasn't looking for a handout. I wanted my dignity back. I wanted a future. So I spent my nights and weekends not feeling sorry for myself, but planning. I had an idea for a gourmet food truck. I knew the market, I knew the numbers. I spent 6 months crafting a meticulous business plan. I did the market research, I sourced suppliers, I created a detailed budget. It was solid. It was my path back to a real life, a life I built myself. All I needed was the startup capital, the capital Alex had promised me. I scheduled a meeting. I put on the one sheep suit I owned and went to his office. It was on the top floor of that skyscraper he had pointed out. The view of the city was breathtaking. His office was a palace of glass and chrome. He listened to my pitch with a practiced, patient smile on his face, steepling his fingers, nodding occasionally. He looked like every venture capitalist I had ever seen in the movies. When I finished, I was hopeful. My plan was good. I knew it was. He leaned back in his leather chair and let out a soft sigh. "Mike," he said, his voice laced with a gentle, condescending pity. "It's a nice idea. Really, cute. But I can't." My heart sunk. "What do you mean you can't? This is a loan, Alex. A business investment. I'll pay you back with interest." He shook his head slowly. "It's not about the money. It's about optics. My investors, my reputation. I can't be officially tied to a convicted felon." I just stared at him, the words not quite registering. A convicted felon. The felon he created. He must have seen the look on my face because he leaned forward, trying to soften the blow. He slid a single $100 bill across the vast marble desk towards me. "Look," he said,
his voice dropping to a confession whisper. I admire the hustle, but this, it's just a bad investment. A bad investment. That was the phrase. That was the kill shot. In that moment, sitting in his palace built on my sacrifice, I finally understood. I wasn't his brother. I wasn't his friend. I was a past transaction, a tool that had served its purpose and was now too risky to keep in the portfolio. The loyalty, the bond, the promise, it all died right there on that marble desk.
I didn't take the $100 bill. I just stood up, nodded, and walked out of his office. I didn't say another word. The rage I felt was so profound, so absolute, that it felt like stillness. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane. I went back to my shabby apartment. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't get drunk. I went to the back of my closet and pulled out a dusty cardboard box filled with old college textbooks. At the very bottom, wrapped in a t-shirt, was the small, silver, digital voice recorder. I hadn't listened to the recording in over 2 years. I put on my headphones, pressed play, and there it was. Alex's voice. Not the smooth, confident baritone of a CEO, but the high, desperate plea of a cornered animal. I swear to you, Mike, I will make this right. I will take care of you. For life. It was all there. His confession, his promise, his bond. My first thought was to go to the police, to expose him. But that would be messy, unpredictable. It would drag me back into the legal system I had just escaped. No. My revenge couldn't be a club. It had to be a scalpel. Precise, clinical, devastating. I spent the next 2 days in the public library, conducting research. I learned everything I could about Alex's new life. I read every article, every interview, and that's when I found her. Rachel Coates, a star investigative journalist for the Financial Chronicle. She was known for her ruthless, in-depth profiles of powerful people. Her current series was called Titans of the New Economy, and her next feature, scheduled to be published in 2 weeks, was a glowing profile of the visionary venture capitalist Alex Thorne. I had found my stage. I created a new, anonymous email address at the library's computer terminal. I went to a small electronics store and bought a cheap USB drive. I went home and digitized the audio file from the recorder. I didn't edit it. I didn't add anything. I just let his own words speak for themselves. Then I went back to the library. I logged in to the anonymous email account. I attached the audio file, and I wrote a simple 2-sentence email. To Ms. Coates, I believe this audio recording provides some important and previously undisclosed context for your upcoming profile on Alex Thorne. I trust you will find it newsworthy. A source. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I clicked send. It felt not like an act of anger, but like an act of balancing, of finally setting a crooked scale right. The first week was silent. I started to wonder if she had even seen the email. Maybe it went to her spam folder. Maybe she thought it was a prank. I went about my life, the quiet hum of the warehouse, my new reality. And then, the following Tuesday, the story broke. It wasn't the glowing profile of a titan. It was a bombshell, a front-page expose in the Financial Chronicle. The headline was brutal. The price of success. A secret confession rocks the world of VC Alex Thorne. Rachel Coates had done her job. The article was a masterpiece of destruction. It had transcripts of the recording, it had confirmation from anonymous former employees, it laid out the entire story of my sacrifice and his betrayal in meticulous, irrefutable detail. Alex's world didn't just crack, it detonated. His firm's stock plummeted in pre-market trading. His investors, horrified by the public scandal, called for his immediate resignation. His business partners, the ones who had celebrated his genius, publicly deserted him. He became a pariah overnight, his name a synonym for fraud and deceit. His perfect life, the one built on my 2 lost years, had been dismantled in less than 24 hours. By his own words. I didn't hear from him. I didn't expect to, but 2 days later I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was his lawyer. He didn't sound like a high-powered attorney. He sounded tired and defeated. "Mr. Jennings," he said, his voice low, "my client is in a difficult position. He is prepared to do whatever is necessary to resolve this situation quietly." "Resolve?" I asked, a cold smile touching my lips. "I think the situation is pretty well resolved." "Please," the lawyer said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "What will it take to make this go away, to ensure the original recording never sees the light of day?" And there it was, the moment of truth. I was in control now. He had called me a bad investment. It was time to show him the return on his initial offering. I didn't ask for a loan. I didn't ask for an apology. I made a business proposition. I named a number, a 7-figure number, one that represented the 2 years of my life I could never get back, the salary I would have earned, the compound interest on his broken promise, the price of my silence. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then a quiet sigh. "The funds will be transferred by the end of the day," the lawyer said. I didn't buy a Porsche. I didn't buy a mansion. The next morning, I quit my job at the warehouse, and a month later, I was standing in front of a small, leased storefront in a part of town that needed a second chance as much as I did. The sign above the door didn't say, "Mike's Gourmet Dogs." It said, "The Second Chance Initiative." It's a nonprofit foundation. We provide microloans and job training to formerly incarcerated people, helping them start their own small businesses. My first investment was in a young woman who wanted to start her own landscaping company. My second was in a man who dreamed of opening a small bakery. Alex thought his legacy would be a skyscraper with his name on it. Mine is a food truck that just got its permit, and 100 other futures he never thought were worth investing in. He built an empire on a lie. I'm building a community on the truth. And I can tell you with absolute certainty which one is built to last.